racist neighbors. We purchased our first home a few years ago. We quickly learned the immediate next door neighbors hold, shall we say, antiquated opinions about race. The wife introduced herself on moving day and used the occasion to warn us the Oriental couple across the street does not maintain their lawn. Okay, minimal interaction with them after that, until a few months later when the old curmudgeon husband apparently had too much to drink and felt empowered to share his true feelings across the fence. You and your colored wife should move back to California. I informed him in colorful language, I'm not from California. I'm actually from New York. Here's how you can tell. God. My colored wife informed him she was born in the city we currently live in. No apology. Not even enough self-awareness to blush. He takes insane pride in his yard, garden. I think it's the only reason he has to leave his couch. Every single time we pluck a mature dandelion, we walk over to the property line and blow the seeds in his direction. 3 years in, and half his garden plus a goodly portion of his lawn is now dandelions. Rude business owner refused to dispose of hazardous waste. About 30 years ago, I worked as a property manager at a commercial industrial building. There was a gentleman who operated a machine shop from one of the warehouses in the back. He occupied the space for decades before I got involved, and as far as knew, he was respectful, friendly, and always paid the rent on time. The trouble began when he decided to retire and close the business. It took several days to move, but when it seemed to be vacant, I entered the space to assess the condition of the unit. Initially, what was left was typical. A desk filled with miscellaneous office supplies, a couple of broken chairs, and some trash here and there, but in the corner there was a large steel drum of used compressor oil. The barrel could hold about 210 liters, 55 gallons, but was half full. Nevertheless, this type of material has to be disposed of in a proper manner. There are services that collect used oil but at a significant cost. At this time, he still had a company van parked outside with a flat tire, so I thought surely he will be back soon to get it along with the barrel of oil. Another week had passed, so I decided to give him a call. He gave some excuses, but said he would take care of it soon. Of course, nothing happened. A couple of more weeks, a couple more calls until finally he snapped, told me to F number cough, and hung up. That's when I decided it was time to get petty. I had noticed that his van had been left unlocked and was virtually empty, so I got a colleague to help, and together we managed to get the barrel into the van. We then threw the desk, the broken chairs, and the trash in there too. I then called a friend of mine who was a cop to give the gentleman a courtesy call, informing him that he had 48 hours to move his van or it would be towed. The very next day he was there with a tow truck he hired to collect the van. I didn't speak to him, but some other tenants who knew him told me he was very upset. They suggested my solution was extreme and unwarranted, but I maintained that I was very patient with him until he crossed the line. Oh, there's snow on your car. You poor thing. Years ago, at the huge nursing home I worked for, we had a princess. She had a bug up her arse toward me for some reason. Maybe because I was the go-to person to get things done and she was not. She would be overheard complaining about me to her pals. I would just laugh. I lived about 10 miles from the work site, and during the winter storms, I was the one that would pick up my coworkers along the way in, some of whom would call out sick because they didn't want to clear their cars, shovel the snow to get to work. That's bullshit. So this one storm snowed overnight and all the next day. Cars were covered at 3 p.m. I hit my remote starter before leaving the building, put on my snow pants, grabbed my push broom, and headed for the parking lot. My 4 passengers were already starting to clear my car when I got there, and together we carried on. Well, here comes Princess. Just her uniform pants, under a fancy cashmere coat, V-neck, fur collar, fancy high-heeled leather boots, fancy leather gloves. Carrying a pizza box along with her fancy handbag, she is parked right next to us. Oh my God, look at my car, she whines, standing there as we are clearing 8 of my car. Almost done, just doing the headlights and bumpers. I stop and look at her for a moment, in disbelief that she just realized that it was snowing. No worries, I'll help you, I say to her. My passengers are now banging off the snow brushes and getting ready to get in my car. Yes, I handed out snow brushes. When we got to work, we all took them into the building, useless if the brushes are in a car covered in snow. I take the pizza box from her hand and set it down on the snow-packed hood of her car. There you go. My passengers are pissing themselves, trying not to laugh out loud as they pile into my car. I keep a straight face as I get in, leaving Princess standing there with her mouth open. She found another job, somewhere. About 6 weeks later, the poor thing. Snow on her car. Please don't move. I ignore him and swap seats. I spent the flight mostly with my eyes closed as I try and fail to get a nap. But I do occasionally have a look at the row in front of me, and I am very satisfied to see that the fat woman in front of me is taking up nearly half of the window seat as well as her own seat, and that the guy in my seat is squashed up against the wall of the plane. I hope he spent the flight thinking about how if he'd just taken his own seat, he'd have been able to swap with the fat woman and I'd have been the one pinned against the wall. Maybe next time he will think twice before he takes someone else's seat, sit in my seat and refuse to move, enjoy being uncomfortable. Last week, I took a flight from Athens, where I'd been visiting relatives, to London. It was a late flight, I was exhausted, and the plane was full. I was in a window seat, which I'd chosen so I could rest my head against the walls and sleep. But when I got to my row, there was a guy in my seat. He had big headphones on and had his head turned away from me. I tried telling him that he's in my seat. He doesn't respond. Thinking maybe he can't hear me because of the headphones, so I gently tap him on the shoulder. No reaction. I try again. Still nothing. He doesn't even turn towards me. Edited to add that he's clearly not asleep. He's sitting upright and I can see his eyes are open. I considered calling over a flight attendant to ask him to move, but there isn't one nearby and I'm not in the mood for it to be a whole thing, so I just take the middle seat and quietly fume. A few minutes later, the young woman who is sitting in the aisle seat arrives and takes her seat. She is traveling with her friend who is sitting in the window seat in the row behind us. They are talking to each other across their seats. Then, the woman sitting in the aisle seat turns to me and asks if I can swap with her friend so they can sit together. I say sure, no problem. Now, at this point, it is important to point out that her friend is very fat, borderline obese. Not fat shaming, I'm a heavy guy myself, but she is at least twice as wide as me. I probably would have swapped even if she hadn't been fat, but I saw a chance at revenge. As I get up to move, I see the guy sitting in my seat has turned around and realized what is about to happen. He doesn't look happy and gives me a look like he's saying, please don't move. I ignore him and swap seats. I spent the flight mostly with my eyes closed as I try and fail to get a nap. But I do occasionally have a look at the row in front of me, and I am very satisfied to see that the fat woman in front of me is taking up nearly half of the window seat as well as her own seat, and that the guy in my seat is squashed up against the wall of the plane. I hope he spent the flight thinking about how if he'd just taken his own seat, he'd have been able to swap with the fat woman and I'd have been the one pinned against the wall. Maybe next time he will think twice before he takes someone else's seat.